I'm here to walk you through the basics of gouache and how to use it. Know what you're buying. You want to get water-based gouache versus acrylic. And the difference is water-based gouache is going to be called artist professional gouache, artist gouache, or designer gouache. Acrylic gouache will either be called acrylic gouache or acryl gouache, ACRYL. And pay really close attention because some of the brands, it's hard to tell the difference. Holbein makes a fabulous acryl gouache or acrylic gouache, as well as Designer's Professional Artist Gouache, which is water-based. And the difference is acrylic gouache is matte acrylic. It's the same as acrylic. It has a binder in it that's a polymer base. You won't be able to reconstitute it. Once it's dry, it's dry. So if you leave it in a palette and it dries, it's dry. Water-based or design gouache can be reconstituted. So you can carry it in a travel palette. You're able to travel with it, reconstitute it, and you don't have to worry about your paint drying out. Other than that, why gouache? Outside of it being the hot new thing, it has a matte finish, which is beautiful to photograph. It dries really fast, and when you're painting with it, it's kind of like painting with oils, but it's kind of like painting with watercolor, and it gives you all the freedom of oil and all the properties of watercolor, but you don't have to be afraid of messing up. You don't have to worry about, oh, I just took too much of my white, or I just contaminated my brightest whites, because you can bring that back. So that's what I really love about the gouache. It gives me the freedom and kind of craziness and the drying factor of watercolor with that acts like an oil paint without me getting too messy with it. And the beauty is I don't have to worry about stacking these carefully. Once they're dry, and make sure they're dry before you put them in an acid-free sleeve, I can just slide them in sleeves, put them in my luggage, and transport them. I don't have to worry about getting them on my clothes or my hands or anything else. I just put them in my luggage and go, and they have traveled very, very well. So let's talk about what you need for this. You really, for this exercise and just trying it out, you don't need a lot. You need an inexpensive synthetic brush, preferably in a flat. This is a 1/2 inch, but use whatever you've got. Or if you have a cheap, old acrylic painting brush, that would work. Just use a synthetic. You need some water, which is easy. You don't need a fancy cup, just whatever you got laying around. You only need a few basic colors. So I'm starting everybody in class with primaries, 1 yellow, 1 red, 1 blue, and a white. And I went ahead and let these dry overnight in this pan so that you guys can kind of see how I work with it. Some people only like working with them wet and they don't like them dry. I like being portable and having them out on my palette. So that's why I like them dry. Is I'm primarily a plein air outside painter. I'm working fast. I don't want to take the time to put paint out, so I have a palette that I work with. So the first thing I want you to do is take the colors however you have put them out. You can dry them, just do it overnight, let them dry in whatever the little palette you have, or just squirt them out wet. Now, if they are dry, you need to activate them or reconstitute them, meaning you need to moisten them. So I use a little spray bottle. I usually have dinosaurs on all my spray bottles. And I will just spray this like that and activate it. So we've activated them with water. We sprayed them if they're dry. If they're not, don't worry about it. I don't want you to add more water to already wet paint. And I want you to work first with your primaries. I'm going to hint to you later when we're painting, do not use the white until you have to, because that is where things start to get really muddy and dirty with gouache. So right now, all we're doing is swatching. And I want you to play with how much how thin you can get the paint and how thick you can get the paint. So mine have been sitting here a little bit, and I'll just take a little bit of water and wet it a little bit, and I say, okay, well, how does that look? And if I add even more water, let's add a bunch of water, I can get it to feel even more like watercolor or even thin it down. And if I scrub it this a little, those of you who've wet paint, you won't have to do this. I can make like think of it like a paste, but you want it movable enough that you can paint with it. So I'm just pushing it around here and getting it kind of pasty. And that's where you can start to get some thick brush strokes with that. Now, when I clean this, if you want to keep your water cleaner, what you can do is quickly dip it and then wipe it on a paper towel. And it'll keep a lot of that color from completely contaminating. It will still contaminate your water. And ideally, if you want clean water, you would have 2 cups. So you could have this cup and rinse it out really, really well. And then you have a clean cup of water that you only put your brush in after you've completely rinsed it. You'll still carry water over to this, but it helps to have 2 cups. I just have one cup for this demonstration. Now I'm going to come in here and do the same thing. Let's move over to red. And I dabbed a little water. So I want to see, how wet, even if I wet my brush and then put it back out here, how much like watercolor it can act. And then the same thing, if I hold this down and we're just going to make this nice and thick. It's really nice and thick. Okay. Now I will usually have a separate palette with whatever I'm working on, and it might be a butcher tray or a great big palette. Today I'll just use whatever I have bonus area on here. So I might take some of this red gouache and throw it on here like a palette. Now I'm wiping my brush because I don't want to get my water too dirty before I have to. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same thing. Now I dropped this and my glue cracked. And you will find that with gouache. A good tip for you if you're putting it in pans, vegetable glycerin is your best friend. A couple dots of this will help keep it from getting crackly. You mix it up in the pan. So you put your paint, add a couple dots of vegetable glycerin, unless it's a really big pan, and then I'll do like 4 or 5 dots of this. And you can get this at any health food stores or on Amazon if you shop Amazon. Walmart is supposed to have it. I have not found it there in a long time. I'm sure they've just hidden it somewhere. I don't know where to look. So I go to Sprouts or Amazon are the easiest. Okay, so same thing. I've done some little swatches. So now what we're going to do is I want you to swatch and just mix them together, and I want you to see what colors and color variations you can get. So now you're going to be limited by the colors that you have with a tricolor. Of course, if you have a magenta and more of a cyan, this is a phthalo blue, but it's closer to cyan. If I had used a magenta for my red, I'd get a much broader range of color than what I have here. But this will give you an idea of what all you can do with these and how much variety you can get. Okay. And same, I'm going to get some yellow, put it over here. Maybe I'll mix it with a little bit of this red. I'm going to see what this yellow and the phthalo blue should give me some really bright greens. Be very careful when you use that blue. It is unbelievably strong. And so it doesn't take much. Now you'll see it went cobalt turquoise almost. Phthalo with a little bit of this yellow. Looks like a cobalt turquoise. And look at these green varieties. And of course, they're very bright. So if you want to get them more like in nature, you're going to put the complement. So we're going to add a little bit of red to it. And that's going to dull it right down. Okay. And get some earthier colors. Right like that. And you can do that with anything if you want to like kind of just calm it down from being so bright, add the complement. Okay? So feel free to take as much as you want time-wise, and I really want you to just play with all of these. Once you get some bright colors without adding white, then I want you to take the white and I want you to see what happens when you add whites and do some swatches with that. Here's some with the green, make some beautiful grays. I want to take some with this cobalt I made and see what kind of pretty turquoises I can make. And then maybe I'll add some of this orange. Ooh, look at that. That's a nice color right there. So play with it, because at this point you're getting the feel for consistency, how much like watercolor you want it versus how much pigment you want in it. All the different colors that you can mix with just this simple triad. Let's see what kind of baby blues we can get. And you'll see I got careless with my water, so it got pretty dirty. Look at these pretty blues. And like I said, the more pigment you add, to the paint, meaning less water, more paint, the more brushy you can get it on an actual painting. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, mix that in there, see what we get. So now I really want you to try to do a painting with all of this. And you know, you may want to take your work area and a paper towel and wipe it up. You can just wipe this chloroplast off. You can even spray it with water. Spray it. And I want you to kind of understand how I work in gouache. Everyone works differently. So there's a lot out there that you can learn. A lot of different people will paint with it. There is no one right way. This is just how I like to paint with it. So I want you all to start with either watercolor paper taped to a sheet or a block. Now I'm just doing a 5x7 sample, so I took a little mini 7x10 block and I put a piece of tape over it, and we're just going to work on half of it. But use whatever you feel comfortable with. I do recommend taping all four sides of your paper down or working on a block so that all four sides are taped down. All right, now I'm just going to do some pears, and I typically will work in a Caran d'Ache watercolor pencil. This is an Albrecht Dürer, and I try different things. I like it to be a cad red light. This one is scarlet red, like scarlet too. But use whatever you feel comfortable with. Part of what I like about this is that it will absorb right into the image and add a little pop of red color throughout. And I don't use an eraser, or I don't use a pencil. So I just use this, or I'll use, if I really feel like I'm being too tight, some days I feel like I'm too tight, I will use a watercolor stick. And I use the organic vermilion. This is not it. Mine is in another kit, but this gives you an idea. of what that is, or I'll use a bright orange. They have an orange that's also in my kit, because I like those brighter pops of color underneath everything. But today we're just going to use a watercolor pencil in a bright red. Now, everyone in the course, and I'll give you guys a download link so that you have a reference. You could just make up a pear if you want. It's a pear. I mean, come on. It's pretty much an oval like this. And then you get another part up here, and then you kind of connect them. Now, this one has a snuggly pear beside it. I just have them right in front of me. And I'm not going to overthink this too much. And he's just kind of leaning against his buddy. And he does have some fabulous angles going on over here. And if I want a little more info in here, I'll just draw it or make it bigger, or if I need to adjust it, I'll just kind of let that happen in there. Maybe I want this guy over here. Maybe I want a hint of where there's going to be a cut light. All of these little pops of color are going to add to my piece as I'm painting. And you'll kind of get a feel for that, of how that mixes in. Now, the shadows are crazy on this. I've got a light on mine coming this way, and then there's a backlight also over in here, and then there's another one. So I've got all kinds of crazy, crazy lights on these guys, on how their shadows are cast. But we're just going to kind of go with that. So you just need a quick minute to draw whatever. Do not agonize about this. I just want you to put some colors down. All right? And like I had you in the swatches, I want you to pretend that this white does not exist. I do not want you to touch this white right here. Now, when I'm out in the field, if I think I'm not going to remember where my darks are or my lights, then I'll do something like, I won't go too crazy. I might come in here and say, okay, I'm going to put, I know this is all going to be lighter, so I might put all yellows in here instead of really going red or orange. It will pick up some of that watercolor pencil, which is really nice, and it will make orange. But I know that these are my lightest, brightest light areas. And what I'm doing is I'm actually treating it right now a lot like a watercolor. I want to put some exciting colors underneath. I may even put the opposite of what's going to be on top. I know this is my shadow back in here, so I'm going to put this back in on this pear. I may want that to go a little bluer. And up in here around that stem. And I know that these colors are going to kind of shine through. Now, if you can think your way through it and want to do the complement underneath all of them, that really gives it a lot of life. So under this darker green, maybe we can do more red. And that's going to make it more exciting. So I kind of just block these in. I know that this side and the tip of that is going to be a little darker. It's a little darker back right there. And also up this stem and right to there. Okay. Lost edges, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Just not even bothering with it. Okay. Notice I have not added any white. I'm being very, very careful with that white. I know that I have a dark shadow under here. And maybe I'll make a wash back here. So I know that shadow is going to be back in there. There's another shadow that kind of comes up in here. And then there's another one that comes right along to there. So we'll put all of that in there. And then let's see what to put in this background area. Now I know it's going to be a lot lighter than everything. I don't know if yellow's my answer, but we're going to start with yellow. It'll help us see the difference between these pieces. You can also add just a little variety. So throw some color in there if you want. But be careful just not to lose your shapes. I just want to fill this in and not lose my shapes. So I'm going to add this guy. Too much water. Okay, so we have quite a bit of water, quite a bit of mess. If you have an area that you feel like I know this is going to take a while to dry, I don't want it to take that long to dry, or if I feel like I have too much color, I can do this. This is still moist, I can go in here and I can lift some of it off, which makes some really neat patterns and variations. So don't feel like you have to keep it. You can also, like this area, if I wanted to lighten that, I wet it and then I will come in here and I can lift some of that color off. Okay, so you've got some ways to work with it. Now it is a hot mess and it looks like a big messy watercolor at this point, and that's not what we're going for. We really want to paint a gouache painting. So at this point we're going to work a lot thicker with the paint, and I want you to think about this as we go through it. Okay, so I'm looking at my subject and I'm going, okay, well I know I want like a yellow green, but I don't want it that yellow green, so I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, kind of calm it down a bit. And this is pretty bright. Now this is still wet underneath, so it's going to bleed a little bit. It will dry as I go. The more you kind of rub your brush like this against it, the more you're going to make a pasty kind of color, and you'll feel that difference. You should also see that as you lay that color down. You're going to see more of that. So let me get more of this yellow. Now I am contaminating my yellow. I'll just tell you that right now. And at this point I'm starting to look and go, okay, I'm comparing some colors. Now I've got something in front of me, which usually I do. If you're working from your imagination, then you do you and whatever you feel like. But I'm really looking for the color variations, and at this point I know that that background is not the same value. In fact, it's almost purpley in the background behind it. So in order to get this edge to show, I want more of like an earthy, creamy purple. So I'm gonna put some yellow out on my palette. Then I'm gonna pick up this blue over here. We're going to start by making the closest purple I can make with this mix. And I'm going to knock it down with the white gouache. So I've got this. Now I know that it is more of that mixed in with an orange yellow. So I'm going to bring a little bit of that into this. And I know that's still not right, so I want more yellow. And more red. And yes, more white. and more yellow. Now, part of what I'm doing today, guys, is making sure that you have enough paint. And I can tell you right now, I do not think that you do. So I'm gonna have to give you plenty of paint. Those who are doing this workshop with me. And I'm just kind of building out some of what we got here. I like to vary my colors. So did you see that? I will mix within a puddle and add to it and change it up so that it gets different, really different throughout as I paint. You see that? And I'm going to get some yellow next. And I'm going to make kind of like some creamier, brighter colors where I think that might be. Now I think it needs a little more, yeah, like a orangey red. Other things to note, gouache, while we're talking about this, gouache dries a value darker. Now I don't worry about it. What I do is I paint, and then as it dries, I will adjust and I'll go, okay, well that's too light. And so I'll start to adjust it and get it to work that way. And you'll see I'm bringing this creamy blend in. And I'm mixing it up, constantly changing these little colors in here. I can even leave some of this peep through or have more variety. Let's go over here and make a red version, more of a pinky color right in here in this background. And then I want less white and more of like an orangey color down below. We'll need a little bit of white though. Okay, way more than I thought. And I'm kind of looking where these shadows go. What's going on in all these spaces. And let's go back to the pears again. Now I've made a mess of my yellow. I've just completely contaminated it. So I'm gonna try to get some bright stuff over here. It's always good to have a tube laying around in case you do this, so that if you need to do that and make a nice bright pile, you can. And we're gonna start with, again, I've got a nice little highlight in here. And also in here, I'm gonna like lay a little more of where that highlight is. And right in here. Now let's add some of this peachy pink because I definitely see it on this pear. Right in here. And you can even have like a little more than actually is there, just to make it fun and exciting. So you can add a little bit of stuff like that in there. And then what a nice green. but I gotta calm it down a little bit. So I'm gonna bring this in here. And my consistency is too thin. So what do? We add more pigment. I need it thicker. So I'm not adding more water. Oop, I got way too much red. I add more pigment. Okay. And you'll see, you can probably start to see it sit on top as I brush that. Should be able to see those marks more. And I'll work in the puddles. See how I have all these puddles? I'm just working right in the puddles I have, adding to each of these. Okay? Again, I am working thicker and thicker paint. The bottom is drying nicely now, and it just gives me all these little pops of color sticking up through. Now, I could hide all of those if I want. That's okay. And really start breaking down. Now I'm known for color, so I'm going to see a lot more color in anything I paint than some people will, because I'm looking for that. I'm looking to what can I exaggerate and bump up. So you're going to kind of see that in my painting. And also, I want a nice dark. So I'm just mixing the phthalo in red. And I want this like really nice dark underneath this pear right here. And then there's a little bit right in here. It gets kind of nice right there, but I want to brush it out a little bit. Same with this. It's not going to be that much. In fact, I may come in here and pull some of that out a little bit. I like all these little bits kind of show up. So you'll see little bits of under that color. I like to keep that. You don't have to. Again, you really need to work on, well, not that I can tell you what you need to work on, but I would suggest that you really make it your own. Paint often. And play, and you're going to get your own method of how any medium works best for you. I'm just here to give you a little bit of guidance, inspiration, hopefully. Okay, now it gets cooler underneath, so I want like a coolish, bluish underneath down here. And warm over on that other side. So I want a little bit of shadow showing what's going on. And let's make a nice dark again. Kind of break out some of these hints of shadow on where things are. I don't have to paint every detail. I can stop with this. I do think I need a little more of a bluish neutral, I guess. Over in here, I don't like that edge. And I kind of like this idea of these blues. I like that a lot. So you always feel free, if you see something you like, change it up. Like I like this blue that I just laid in here, okay? And I can change these like this. I like that a lot. So I may just go in here and drop that in. Okay. I kind of like the balance it has between this, that, and that over here. And I can also look and say, okay, what don't I like completely? Or what do I need to adjust? Maybe this needs to be a lot brighter in here. Okay, so that gives you the idea. Now, the last step that I will typically do once this dries enough is I'm going to add those final sprinkles, we'll call them. These are those little last touches and brush strokes that really make a difference and make things stand out. So sprinkles are, let's see. I'm going to get some clean color. So put a little more yellow out, not a lot. And I may clean this white up a little bit. Now my water, as you can see, is very dirty. I was not careful. I just let it in there. So I'm gonna get some of this. And those of you who come to class will see from my demo, I do think this is a little too, I do need to green some things up. So we've got a little more work to do here. This side of this pear is not right. So I need to green it up. So we're gonna do exactly what I said, only it's not really what I said. I was talking sprinkles and then I'm like, wait a second, that is just too yellow right there. So I'm just gonna come in here like this. Brighten that up. And now I'm gonna look over here and say, well, what does this guy need? I think he needs a lot more yellow over on this side. right in here. Maybe even pull from this guy. And now let's look for those little dots of something or other that I can zip it up with. So I think a little highlight right in there, maybe a little right in there. I see a little bit of like a shiny, creamy highlight on the back end of this right here. And also on this edge. So I might want to pop some things like that in there. And I usually will, these are going to be like a thicker paint, probably my thickest. And they're very painterly. Notice how these strokes are, they're painterly. So these are the little like, ta-da's, the little shiny things that come through. And again, I'm just lightening up. I'm looking at this and going, okay, does it need a better transition? So can I use some of these colors and give it more of a transition between these pieces? I think so. That's what I'm messing with right now. So you see me doing a little bit of that. Okay. And from here, I would let it completely dry and then sit back and look at it again and go, all right, what would make this more exciting, more vibrant? Like what would happen if I add a little more of this in here? Do I add more purple up here? So I'm really going to play with the what ifs. Okay? That's it for your second demo. In this next demo, we are going to test painting on a panel. Now, I've prepared panels for all of you. This one is Bockingford paper. It is not 100% cotton, and I really want to see how it does. And I've mounted it on Canson board. Now, when you start mounting your own panels, if you ever do this, a little tip for you, I do not like these boards. There's a little bit of bend in it. It is okay once you frame it. However, I would prefer it to be just straight. So this surface was a multimedia Canson watercolor panel or multimedia panel. And then I prepared it and added material to it. And if you are watching this before February 19th and you want to see how to make these, I am going to be teaching that along with painting and framing and varnishing your gouache paintings in Gouache Bootcamp. And you can get 10% off that. The cost of Gouache Bootcamp with my last name at checkout. That's AHLM. So just a little tip for you if you really want to learn all about this process. So we're just going to start. I'm going to put this little weirdly cut corner down here in the corner. And we're going to work with the sheep. And you have a reference photo that I gave all of you. And the first thing I do is normally I will work in a watercolor stick, a Daniel Smith watercolor stick, but you can work in a pencil as well. I do love the sticks because it keeps me loose, wild and loose. And I prefer the organic vermilion. It's like a cad red light kind of color. is a comparable color, and I love that it puts a little more color down, so you have these little spots of red throughout. Now I have provided a pencil for all of you, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one in pencil. And I first want to kind of lay my sheep out and divide this in thirds. So I know I want his head to kind of hit in this section over here, and I'm just going to put like a great big area, and I'm not going to erase. I just leave the marks and let them mix in to help add a little bit of a burst of color throughout. Okay, so that gives me an idea of where his head is. His nose is about, really, if you're looking at drawing skills, you want to go, it's about halfway through here in his massive curly locks. And then it's also right about where that knob on the pole that cuts up through him is. Now you have artistic license, so you can change all this. You don't have to draw it just the way you see it here. And I'll bring it down to right about there so that we can see our shadows. This is underneath his belly. That's kind of important. I know he's got a lot of fur going on in here. There's a big shadow block right through here. His neck will come back in here. And that means that if his little nose is right there and his little face comes around right there, it's got a little jaw, comes up. Now already I can tell you, if I had used my watercolor stick, I would not be getting in the weeds. Right now I am definitely in the sheep weeds. So a lot more detail than I would put with a watercolor stick. I would have just kind of thrown a triangle on there and left it. But while you're in the weeds, just go for it, right? So there's some of that stuff in here, and then his cute little foot. This is little hoof right up in here. There's another leg behind it you can barely see because it's matching pretty much the shadows in this space. And then there's a sharp angle that comes out and back behind him. That's going to go all the way in there. There's a wall right by his face. I think I'm going to drop it down a little bit so that I don't have it coming right out of his mouth. And I love these back in here. This vague pull. Here you've got his belly coming in, and then there's this fabulous shape that this foot comes back, and then in here lines up in there. Actually, I think I would have to end it probably right about there. And then he's got another leg right behind it. And I'm looking at this, just start drawing the shapes in between. You don't even have to think about what you're drawing if you look at the shapes in between. Okay, and I'm gonna make his butt just a little longer and his little tail. And there you go. Now that pole, I kind of put it in the wrong place before. So we'll go with this one. We're going to ignore this over here. There's kind of like some fun stuff back in here. And I'm just going to leave this as vague space, whatever's back there. And we're ready to paint. Now you all have 3 colors to work with. That's all you need this pencil for. You don't have to do much or all the details. You just need enough to know where you're going to be painting to put the information in. There's just a little cute little goat face. And I give you all just an inexpensive synthetic brush. They are well loved and used. it's all you need to practice and get the feel for this medium, because it's really all I want you to do. I want you to feel the difference between the substrates. I want you to see what it's like to paint on a loose piece of watercolor paper, what it's like to paint on a tape down or one that would be in a block. And then I want you to experience what it's like to paint on a panel. So you have 3 colors. You may have some weird reds and yellows. You don't have a split complement palette or split primary mint. And you just need a cup of water. And the first thing I do is I try to stay away from this white completely. I try not to touch it. Now, I may not match these exactly. I just pulled some tubes and I'm not sure what I poured in these. They were test paints. So I tried to match it by eyeball, but they may differ a little bit from what I have in the pans. And I start with actually, I could say I pretty much always start with yellow. And I use this to kind of guide me. Where is the light? So I'm going to come in here and I know that his head has yellow, this whole area in here. It's all yellow. It does have that shadow going back, so I can paint that solid and then just paint over it, or I can paint around it. I'll just paint over it later. So block of yellow. And I paint with the gouache a lot like watercolor. I use washes of bright color when I begin. So I'm just reminding myself where these bright highlights are. And I will pick some of the red up and make orange. I don't mind. I think that adds to it because I layer that on top. So I'm just going to come in here and lay these colors. Now I'm going to look at my pole and go, okay, where's my light? Here's my light. Okay, that's all going to be bright light. Okay, and there's some on this pole over here. So that's pretty much where my lights are, and my darks are going to go in next. Oh, and there might be like a little back here so you can see where that pole is. One more here. It's a little bit here and then back there. Okay, so now I'm going to lay my darks in, and I go, where's my darkest dark? What am I going to put under there? I see a lot of like green turquoise back in here. It's going to turn a little earthier in other places. So let's start with this obvious turquoise color. And I'm going to take and mix some of the yellow and my blue and kind of wash this in this zone. So it's going to come down here. I'm not going to worry about details or getting it perfect. I just want to get the idea of where this dark area is, and I'm blocking in large shapes. If I lose edges, I'm fine with that. So if I bump up against another wet area and I lose it, I'm okay with that because I think it creates a lot of interesting stuff. So I just leave it. Okay. Now it's a little warmer over here. So I may go in and grab some red. Now, and pay attention, I have not touched my white yet. There is no white in anything that I have painted so far. So that's a nice cool color, and I want this to be maybe that purple blue down here too. And you can grab color at this point, you know, see how much, if you just touch the water and put that in the pan, what does that look like? I just had a little dot right there. Look how I'll grab that off just by putting an edge of the paper towel on that. And I didn't get all of it, but I got a nice amount. Okay. It will feel so much like watercolor, and just let it do its thing. And I know I said this to you before, but I really want to remind you, there's never a right way to do anything or the only way to do anything. I really think that everybody finds their own journey and their own way to paint, and the materials can be used so many different ways that I encourage you to, you know, try this method to play with it, but find your own way to paint with it. You may find something completely different. I watched a video a couple days ago to see how another artist painted with gouache, and it is so very different from how I manage his medium, and it really gave me insight to exactly what I just said. Is like, there is no right way or wrong way to do this. Just find your way. Okay, and then the back of these poles, just gonna put that in there. A little bit of darkness in here underneath this horn right there. Okay, and then I've got some through here. So there's a little bit of, it's pretty blue, gets pretty blue in his coat, because he has shadow on this side of his face and his ear, and then coming down through here. And I just blocked that whole shape in. Same over here. His butt is all in shadow till it gets to this one point. And then it's very dark on this back leg. So you can make a dark back leg. Same back here, there's like a lot of darkness back in here. So I may plop more dark in some of those. The back of this pole is very dark. And then they've got these great cast shadows. So I can go in here and draw this shadow back to the pole. Comes out a little bit underneath him. And I can lighten or darken these, but really I'm just separating darks and lights. Remember I said that back leg is really hidden back in there. Okay, so it looks pretty much like the picture. There's a lot of variation, but I've got a foundation of color. If I'm outside painting, because I'm a plein air painter, at this point, most of it's dry. I'm usually sitting in the sun. The wind is helping to blow all the extra stuff off of it. And so I really don't have to worry too much about it drying. But this right now is pretty wet, and I would recommend it. Just walk away from it for a little bit and let it dry somewhat so that you're not working mud or wet into wet. And try painting outside with it too. I want you to see the difference between how long it takes to dry when you're working inside versus how long it takes to dry when you're working outside, because there is a difference. Okay? I'm going to add a little more yellow and more white to my palette because I don't have much. And I think I'm okay for right now on blue and red. So I'm just going to add some white, maybe. And I'll just use that toothpick to paint with. Okay. At this point, I'm going to start to build a second thicker layer. Now this will be a lot more pigment and a lot less water. Not completely soft body acrylic yet. When I start to put those final details, you'll see I use a lot thicker paint. But this is kind of middle of the road. It's definitely gouache. It's not watercolor at this point when I start to lay these colors in. So I usually will work with a dried palette, but when I run out of color, I add wet. So it's a weird little hybrid that I've got going on. Most people will only work with gouache when it's wet. I like the dry palette because I feel like I have a little more, I wouldn't say control, but I can really feel the difference when I water it down and thicken it up. So I'm just laying these brights in here. Start to edit the image a little bit. And as I go, I'll start adding different colors. So I usually like to have a butcher tray or a large palette. Also, a Masterson's mini palette works great. So if you have one of those, I encourage you to try that so that you have lots of mixing color. Now I have added white. Keep in mind, I started adding white. As soon as you add white, you're gonna get mud. The less white you use, the less mud you're gonna have. So I really wanted more of an orange color and not so mud, but let's see what I can get, if I can compromise in between. Not really. And I'm seeing a lot of blue when I squint, so I might just go with it. Now he looks green. Purple? Let's see what we got here. It is more of a neutral. I like to change my colors up a lot as I go, so I'll mix continuously and just adjust it. Make it a little warmer, make it a little cooler, and try to paint the colors that I see, or the warmth or coolness and the value. So it may not match it exactly, but I'm looking for that value and temperature. I want to make it like a peachy pink kind of color. And that is way too pink. So come back over here. Getting better. Add a little more of that in here. Like I said, remember I said I add darkers, I add darks, lights, darkers. I don't even think that's a word. The shadow on him over here with his ear, a little under his mouth. He's got like a great big dark area down in here. And in here. And then I'll go lighter again. So that's too light. I'm just going to kind of try to go back and forth to build these parts out. This is a little warmer, so I want it still to be gray, but a warm neutral gray right on this side. And then even lighter, but warm. That's too warm. A little better. Look for some of this variation throughout. And that really dark leg. Now I have too much water, so I'll dab this off. If I get too much water on the brush, I'll just dab it on a paper towel and I can get rid of a little bit of that water. I also, you only have 3 primaries in white, and you'll see based off this exercise, you can do quite a bit with 3 primaries in white. So I hope you have fun testing it out and trying it. Now I'm really starting to look at what color is back behind him. This is dark, but definitely darker than him. Some green. Nice dark area right there. Some back in here. Can even add a little water, add some mystery to it, leave some spots. Same in here. And I'm gonna take that and make a little more brown, but lean it towards a blue and put some pattern in this. So there's these gorgeous lines, patterns in the stained wood that's behind him. Leans pretty yellow, but we're gonna leave some of that turquoise peeking out. Just add some of these random wood grain shapes. Now I could have just left this without doing this, but I really like what's going on back in the background. I think it adds a lot to the whole thing. I don't want it too splotchy, so I'm going through and I'm connecting some of these darks. Like that. Okay. And I see a light creamy brown pink, I guess. Over in here. So I may add some of that. May even need to be lightened up a little bit. I think that's too light. I also want you to practice just using one brush. I'm doing this whole thing with this one brush. So you'll learn to make better marks and adjust your marks. Kind of looking to see what I got going on in here. It's got a horn over here and a horn over here, and his ear. It's got some highlights down under. Just bring some of these highlights again. And a whole bunch of light. Now I'll have to lighten this up even more, but I'm going to put this yellow on first. I see almost like an orange. Let's see what I can get with these colors. And I kind of find that back in here and under the bottom of this part of his face. And a little bit even above his eye. And I'm going to bring some of that pinky orange back in here. Down in here. Okay. And let's go ahead and make a brownish color for right in here on some of these logs. Kind of brushes out, but And the consistency is way thicker than straight watercolor feel, but still got quite a bit of water in it. So it flows well and it's loose. And the only way I can tell you to really get a feel for that is to try it. You're just gonna have to figure it out and play with it. Adding more layers to lighten this up before I get the brightest whites on. Back here. He's got a couple little squiggles back in here. Got some light on the back of this. And I might want to whiten up this guy right here. Okay. He needs a little more of a purple shadow color in his face. So I'm gonna bring a little more darkness in here and kind of carry this up because it comes over and then down. It's not quite right. And I can lift some of this up. So if I think I just pushed it too far, I can lift it up. Okay. Now, I may get to a point where I need a bright palette because I am so dirty and contaminated in this thing that I can't really achieve a bright color. So don't ever be afraid to put everything down and do some cleanup. If you ever get to a point where you feel like you just can't get your brights bright enough because your palette's so dirty. I'm kind of there with a really dirty palette, which is funny. Okay. Now this ground color is not that dull. It's going to be a lot brighter than that. So let's kind of stain it. That color. And I'm getting kind of messy, but that's okay. Seeing how far I can get with this palette before I just have to rinse it completely and start from scratch. So there, his little eye is going to be in here and I just can't get it dark enough. Too much water. Be right in there. We've got this crazy ear action going on over here. Some stuff in here. And the bottom of that ear, I'll just go ahead and line that out. Put a little more stuff down in this area. And while I'm using up stuff on my palette, I'll go ahead and put some darks in here. Okay. And I might want to lay some neutral colors in here too. So I'm just kind of laying these on top where I think I need to lay them. And I think we need to pause for a second, and I'm going to clean my palette, and then we're going to come back into this. Okay, I'm back. So a little tip for you, common sense, clean your palette if it gets too muddy. I could not work with that palette any longer. So now that I've got these clean colors, look at this. I can come in here and just add the brightest, I can put a little yellow in that. Dabs of color, it needs a little more yellow than that. And it's not dirty any longer. I was working with so much dirty color that I couldn't get that, like a bright highlight on my piece. I was just making mud. So when it gets to a point where you're making mud and you just feel like you can't get it right, wash your palette, start again, and go back into it. Okay, I'm looking for these really, really bright areas. And just dabbing these final little colors on. So at this point, I'm gonna work as thick as I ever get. It's movable. You know, it's not straight out of the tube. There is still liquid in it, okay? It's got a little bit of light coming right in there. This pole gets really white. Right here and in there. And over here, that side of his head. Now let's see what I can do over here. I did not have the right kind of blue. I knew as soon as I poured it out. So we're just gonna do our best to work with what we've got. But I want to be able to show his eye in here. And the side of his little face, which comes in here. And I want to make that more yellow and warm. some of this stuff will come down in here. I start seeing so many colors. And I'll kind of just start throwing them in wherever I feel like I see some of this variation on him. And I'm just looking for those little tiny things that make a difference. I know that his face isn't quite right yet, so I want to resolve that. And I'm looking at what do I mix to resolve that? So some of this needs to be a little darker in here. Come over more in here. There's a little more light that pops out underneath his chin. Like right back in here. So if I put that up in there and then connect it. Throw some of these in here. I think that was way too big of a horn. And even some unexpected colors sometimes nice. Might want to work a little bit of that in. I think that's too yellow, but let's peach it up a little bit. Maybe a little too much. Kind of work that in with the other stuff on top. So it's not so bright. Kind of helps. It's got a bunch of fun lighter fur going on in here. We'll kind of let it mix in with everything else that is in there. So I'm just going to kind of put some like little lines. That. And then he needs a little bit of backlight edges, just like right here maybe. Just popping that out. Back in there. And let's finalize this and just clean up. Give him a nose. So let's see what kind of dark I can create with the blue and the red. Very purpley. I can tone that down a little bit with some yellow. Grade it a little bit much, but that's okay. So mouth, eye, not perfect, but good enough. A little more with the ear. Oh, I see something. I kind of missed this hoof down here. So he kind of has this grayed out hoof that blends right in with the ground. Kind of happens on all of these. So I'll just drop that on there. And I think that's good enough for what we're doing. It gives you something to play with, a fun little painting to do, and just see how much you like to work with it, how much you like the surface. I like working on a panel because I just feel like I don't have to fight that moving paper. It's all stuck down. I think it sits on top of it really different. So just my thoughts on it, but try it out. Have a good time. Enjoy painting, everybody. Thanks for watching.